These pickup trucks were death traps on wheels. They killed their own drivers. And yeah, this is completely real. Engines that would fire up by themselves, gas tanks exploding like grenades, frames rusting so bad the trucks literally snapped in half. Let's dive into the 10 deadliest, most recalled, nightmare-engineered pickup trucks that car makers wish you'd forget about. Number 10. Chevrolet El Camino SS 454. Back in 1970, Chevrolet had this wild idea. Stuff a 450 horsepower monster into what's basically a sedan with a pickup bed. The El Camino SS 454 was pure chaos on four wheels. More power than most race cars back then. But here's where it gets sketchy. It still had brakes and suspension from a normal family car. Picture this: trying to stop 4,000 pounds of screaming metal with a 7.4-liter V8 using drum brakes meant for grocery runs. Owners figured out pretty quick that the El Camino SS 454 would blast from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. But going from 60 back to 0 in under 10 seconds? Yeah, totally different story. Weight distribution was a nightmare. Empty bed meant the rear was so light, all that torque would just smoke the tires at highway speed. Throw some cargo in and the front end would lift like a boat launching. The suspension was way out of its league. Floor it hard and the rear axle would literally hop sideways. Drivers called it the death dance. One car journalist said it felt like riding a mechanical bull that's actively trying to kill you. Insurance companies caught on fast. By 1971, the SS 454 premiums were so crazy most people couldn't even afford coverage. Chevrolet only made the SS 454 for 1 year. They blamed emissions laws, but everyone knew what was really going on. Too many drivers were wrapping these things around trees, ending up in ditches, smashing into other cars. Security footage even caught someone in a Chevy El Camino slashing tires on 3 Elmont cop cars. Today, the survivors are worth serious money to collectors who apparently enjoy living dangerously. The El Camino SS 454 proved you really can have way too much power. Number 9. Dodge Dakota Convertible. Picture this. It's 1989 and Dodge executives are in a meeting trying to make pickup trucks more exciting. Someone says, "Hey, what if we just chop the roof off?" And somehow everyone thought this was brilliant. The Dakota Convertible was born, and physics immediately started laughing at them. Pickup trucks need structural strength to haul and tow. The roof and pillars are critical to that strength, so Dodge just deleted them. What you got was a truck that twisted like a pretzel every time you hit a bump. Owners said the doors would jam shut on rough pavement because the frame flexed so hard. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending how you look at it. The convertible top was manual, needing 2 people, and about 15 minutes just to put it up or down. Get caught in sudden rain? Too bad. By the time you wrestled the top up, you and everything inside was soaked. The frame flex also meant that the convertible top never sealed right. Rain leaked in constantly, dust poured in on dirt roads, and at highway speed, the wind noise was louder than the engine. Dodge planned to build 2,000 Dakota convertibles. They cranked out 3,000 at 759, mostly because dealers were desperate to get rid of them. The planning boss later admitted they were chasing a market that didn't really exist. Convertible pickups cruising around California, all custom builds from chop shops. Turns out there was a good reason those were one-offs. The Dakota Convertible is still the only factory convertible pickup ever sold in the US. Pretty obvious why. Number 8. International CXT. In 2004, International looked at pickup trucks and thought, these aren't nearly big enough. So they grabbed a platform designed for dump trucks and snowplows and turned it into a civilian vehicle. The CXT dropped and common sense just left the building. This beast was absolutely massive. We're talking 9 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and 21 feet long. Weighed 14,000 pounds empty. That's heavier than 3 Honda Civics combined. The hood was so tall you literally couldn't see a full-size car if it stopped in front of you. International's solution? They told buyers to just be extra careful. The CXT came with air brakes because regular brakes couldn't stop this thing. That meant, in some states, you needed a commercial license just to drive it to the store. Speaking of errands, good luck parking this nightmare anywhere. It didn't fit in parking spots, parking garages, or most gas stations. The turning radius was measured in city blocks, but the real danger wasn't just size, it was watching regular people get behind the wheel of something built for professional truckers. The CXT had 0 crumple zones, 0 airbags, and 0 electronic stability control. In a crash with a regular car, the CXT would literally roll right over it. Police reports from CXT crashes kept using words like catastrophic and unsalvageable when describing what happened to the other vehicle. International sold these for around $100,000, though fully loaded ones could hit $150,000. They marketed it as the ultimate in capability. What they didn't mention was that capability included accidentally flattening everything in your path. Production quietly ended after just a few years, though International never said exactly how many they sold. Probably because admitting you unleashed these road monsters isn't great for your image. Number 7. Reliant Ant. The 1960s were bizarre for car design, but nothing captures that weirdness like the Reliant Ant. This British pickup had 3 wheels. Yeah, 3. One less than literally every other vehicle on the road. What could go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything went wrong. The Reliant Ant had 2 wheels in back and 1 up front, which gave it the stability of a bar stool on black ice. The center of gravity was way too high. Turn at anything above walking speed, and the inside rear wheel would lift right off the ground, hit a sharp turn, and the whole thing would tip over. But here's the truly insane part. This was designed as a work truck. The bed was supposed to carry loads, except adding weight to the bed made it even more unstable. Cargo would shift during turns, messing with the already sketchy balance. Drivers quickly learned to pack everything toward the front and pray. The Ant's party trick was something called reversing terror. Because of that single front wheel, backing up with any steering would make the rear swing all over the place. Construction sites banned them after too many accidents. One British safety inspector described watching an Ant reverse as like watching someone try to control a shopping cart full of explosives. The weather made it all worse. Rain turned the Ant into a spinning top. Snow, forget it. A light crosswind could blow it into the next lane. The government eventually required Ant drivers to get special licenses. Not because it was powerful, but because it was so dangerous you needed training just to survive driving it. Reliant claimed the 3-wheel setup was for economy and handling. Reality? 3-wheelers were taxed as motorcycles in Britain, making them cheaper. They saved buyers a few bucks in taxes and cost them years off their lives from stress. The Ant stayed in production until 1981, proving bad ideas can stick around way too long. Number 6. Nissan Titan First Generation. Nissan's first attempt at a full-size pickup was bold. Maybe too bold. The first-generation Titan dropped in 2004 with huge hype and an even bigger list of problems that would haunt owners for over a decade. The issues started with the rear axle. Nissan used a Dana M226 rear differential with a serious design flaw. The axle seals would fail, letting gear oil leak out. No oil meant metal grinding on metal. Drivers would hear a howling sound that got progressively louder until boom! The differential would explode, sometimes locking the rear wheels at highway speed. But that was just the beginning. The radiators were made with defective plastic that would crack, dumping coolant into the transmission through cooler lines. Owners wouldn't know until their transmission started slipping. By then, both the radiator and transmission needed replacing. The repair bill, usually over $5,000. Then came the exhaust manifolds. They'd crack, making a ticking sound like a time bomb, because it kind of was. The cracks would spread, eventually leaking exhaust fumes into the cabin. The catalytic converters would fail too, triggered by the manifold issues. Some Titans went through 3 sets of manifolds before hitting 100,000 miles. The brake problems were maybe the scariest. The Titan's huge weight needed equally huge brakes. But Nissan apparently forgot about that. Brake rotors would warp after just 20,000 miles. Calipers would seize. Panic stops became terrifying as the truck would violently pull to one side. Electrical gremlins plagued every system. The fuel gauge would randomly read empty. The airbag light would flash for no reason. The stereo would die, and the power windows would stop working. One owner said his Titan's entire electrical system died while driving on the highway at night. Everything went black. No lights, no power steering, no power brakes. Just 5,500 pounds of metal coasting in complete darkness. By 2015, Nissan basically gave up and completely redesigned the Titan from scratch. They've never publicly admitted just how bad the first generation was, but the used market tells the whole story. First-gen Titans lose value faster than almost any other truck. Wonder why? Number 5. Ford F-250 6.0 Powerstroke Diesel. Ford's partnership with International to build the 6.0-liter Powerstroke diesel was supposed to change the game for heavy-duty pickups. Instead, it created what many consider the most problematic engine in pickup history. The 6.0-liter Powerstroke turned F-250s and F-350s into rolling time bombs. Problems started before the engine even warmed up. The exhaust gas recirculation EGR cooler would rupture, dumping coolant straight into the engine. Owners would start their trucks to see white smoke pouring from the exhaust like a fog machine. But that was just the warm-up. The head gaskets were apparently made of tissue paper. They'd fail catastrophically, mixing oil and coolant into a chocolate milkshake of destruction. The fuel injection system was so overcomplicated, it seemed designed to fail. The FICM fuel injection control module would overheat and quit, leaving you stranded on the road. The high-pressure oil pump would die without warning. The turbocharger would stick open or closed. The oil cooler would clog. Every single part seemed determined to fail. But here's what made it truly scary. These failures often happened suddenly at highway speeds. Imagine towing a 10,000-pound trailer when your engine suddenly loses all power. No warning, no gradual decline, just instant failure. Power steering would go heavy, the turbo would stop boosting, and you'd be coasting in traffic with a massive trailer pushing you forward. Ford's response? Deny everything. They blamed owners for poor maintenance. They blamed bad fuel. They blamed modifications. They blamed everything, except their own engineering. Dealerships turned into war zones as angry owners demanded answers. Some dealers started flat-out refusing to work on 6.0-liter trucks at all. The harsh aftermarket stepped in, with bulletproofing kits costing $4,000 to $8,000. Think about that. The engine was so bad that an entire industry popped up just to make it reliable. These kits replaced the EGR cooler, head gaskets, oil cooler, and other components with upgraded parts that should have been there from the start. Class action lawsuits piled up like crazy. Ford eventually extended warranties and quietly made changes, but the damage was done. The 6.0-liter Powerstroke killed Ford's diesel reputation for years. Even now, mention 6.0 Powerstroke to a diesel mechanic and watch them cringe. Some wounds don't heal. Number 4. Dodge Ram HD Diesel Fire Recall. You'd think by 2021 car makers would know how to build trucks that don't randomly catch fire. Dodge proved otherwise. Between 2021 and 2023, Ram heavy-duty diesels developed this terrifying habit, catching fire without any warning. The problem was the intake heater grid relay. In diesel engines, this part helps warm the intake air for cold starts. In affected Rams, the relay would overheat, melt, and ignite. The scariest part? This could happen with the engine completely off. Owners would park their trucks in garages, go to bed, and wake up to find their house on fire. The first reports started trickling in during late 2021. A Ram owner in Texas saw smoke coming from under his hood while the truck sat parked. He popped the hood to find flames eating away at the engine cover. Then came the Michigan incident. A 2022 Ram 30-2500 burned to the ground in a driveway, taking a nearby shed with it. The owner had parked it just 2 hours earlier. By 2023, Stellantis, Ram's parent company, couldn't ignore it anymore. They recalled over 300,000 trucks. But here's where it gets wild. Their initial solution was to tell owners not to park indoors. That's right. Their fix for trucks that randomly catch fire was to make sure they burn outside instead of inside. Super reassuring. The official count was 6 fires with 1 injury, but diesel forums told a different story. Owners reported melted wiring, smoke incidents, and close calls that never made it into official statistics. One owner posted pictures of his melted relay with the caption, "Found this 5 minutes before a 2,000-mile road trip with my family." When Stellantis finally developed a proper fix, It involved replacing the relay with an updated design. But customer trust was already shot. Imagine dropping $70,000 on a truck and being told you can't garage it because it might torch your house. Some owners traded their Rams at massive losses just for peace of mind. The most infuriating part? This wasn't cutting-edge technology. Intake heater grids have been around forever. Other brands made them work without setting vehicles on fire, but somehow Ram couldn't figure it out. Just goes to show that even in 2023, pickup trucks could still find new and creative ways to put their owners in danger. Number 3. Toyota. Tacoma Tundra frame. Toyota built its reputation on reliability. Engines that ran forever, transmissions that never quit. But between 1995 and 2010, Toyota trucks had this secret that would literally tear them apart. Frames that rusted from the inside out until the truck split in half. It started innocently enough. Owners in the Rust Belt saw some surface rust on their frames. Nothing unusual for older trucks in salty climates. But this wasn't normal rust. The frames were rotting from the inside, where owners couldn't see it. The first sign of trouble was often complete failure. Leaf springs would punch through rusted frames. Spare tires would fall off on highways. Brake lines would snap when the frame sections holding them just disintegrated. The horror stories started flooding in. A contractor in Michigan was driving his Tacoma when he heard this massive crack. The bed had partially separated from the cab. The frame had snapped right behind the cab. Another owner in Wisconsin found out his problem when he jacked up his truck for an oil change. The jack punched straight through the frame rail like it was cardboard. But the scariest incidents happened while towing. The frame would fail right at the hitch mount, sending trailers sliding across highways. One Tundra owner in Ohio said his boat trailer passed him on the interstate. The frame had snapped and the trailer's momentum carried it past the truck before jackknifing into the median. Toyota's response was interesting. They initially denied any problem existed. Then they blamed road salt. Then they blamed owners for not washing their trucks enough. Finally, after a $3.4 billion class action lawsuit, they came clean. They had outsourced frame production to a supplier who didn't properly apply anti-corrosion coating. The recall was massive. Toyota had to inspect hundreds of thousands of trucks. If the frame was bad enough, they'd buy the truck back at 1.5 times its Blue Book value. If it was salvageable, they'd apply rust treatment. In severe cases, they'd replace the entire frame. Imagine that. Completely rebuilding a truck from scratch because the skeleton was rotten. The frame replacement process was insane to watch. Technicians would lift the entire body and drivetrain off the rusted frame, roll in a new frame, and rebuild the truck. It took weeks and cost Toyota thousands per vehicle. Some dealerships had parking lots full of trucks waiting for new frames, like some kind of automotive zombie apocalypse. Even now, the problem continues. Many affected trucks are still on the road because owners missed the recall deadline or bought used trucks without knowing the history. Check any Tacoma or Tundra forum, and you'll find fresh posts from owners discovering their frames are toast. Toyota extended warranties and offered repairs. But time limits meant a lot of owners got stuck with worthless trucks that looked fine on the outside, but were structurally doomed. Number 2. Chevrolet GMC CK1500. General Motors made a decision in 1973 that would end up killing more people than any other car defect in American history. They needed more fuel capacity for their pickups, so they mounted gas tanks outside the frame rails. They called it the side saddle design. Safety experts called it murder. Here's the physics. In a side impact, the tank would get hit first. No frame protection, no crumple zone, just thin sheet metal between 20 gallons of gasoline and whatever hits you, the tanks would split open like watermelons. As one GM engineer later testified, sparks from the collision would ignite the spilling fuel. Victims were literally burned alive. The numbers are staggering. Over 2,000 people died in fire crashes involving these trucks. That's more than 20 times the death toll of the infamous Ford Pinto. And those are just the deaths. The injuries, severe burns, disfigurement, lifelong trauma, numbered in the thousands. GM knew from day one. Internal memos from 1973 show engineers recommending tanks be placed inside the frame rails as close to the center of the vehicle as possible. Management overruled them. The side-mounted design gave them 40-gallon capacity, which became a selling point. Sales won out over safety. More internal documents surfaced during lawsuits. In 1972, a GM engineer wrote that occupants should be protected from post-collision fuel fires. Another engineer said the only worst place to mount a fuel tank would be on the front bumper. The real-world crashes were horrific. A family in California was stopped at a red light when a car hit their CK pickup at just 35 mph. The tank ruptured, fuel sprayed everywhere, and the family was engulfed in flames. The parents died trying to save their children. All four perished. This scenario repeated hundreds of times across America. T-bone crashes that should have been survivable turned into death sentences. Low-speed impacts that would normally cause minor injuries ended with victims burning to death while trapped in twisted metal. Fire departments reported arriving at scenes where people were still alive, but couldn't be pulled out before the flames reached them. GM's response was criminal. They denied everything. They blamed drivers. They claimed the design met all federal standards, which was technically true because the standards were pathetically weak. They spent millions on lawyers and PR campaigns while people kept dying. In 1993, NBC's Dateline aired a segment showing the trucks exploding in test crashes. GM sued, claiming the tests were rigged. Turns out NBC had used model rocket engines to guarantee a fire, which gave GM ammunition to discredit all criticism. But the truth remained. Even without NBC's mistake, these trucks were rolling firebombs. The government finally stepped in 1993, demanding GM recall the trucks. GM refused. Instead, they offered $1,000 coupons toward new GM vehicles. Think about that. Their solution to killing 2,000 people was a discount on your next purchase. Some victim families got settlements in the millions, but GM sealed the records. They never admitted fault, never apologized, never truly fixed the problem. Many of these trucks are still on the road today, 50 years later, still carrying their side-mounted death traps. Number 1. Ford Bronco II. If you wanted to engineer the perfect disaster, you'd create the Ford Bronco II. Short wheelbase, narrow track, high center of gravity, stiff suspension, terrible weight distribution. Ford's engineers looked at this recipe for disaster and said, "Ship it." The Bronco II's rollover problem was pure physics. At 158 inches long with a 94-inch wheelbase, it was shorter than most compact cars but sat as tall as a full-size truck. The track width was just 56.8 inches. The center of gravity was so high that Ford's own engineers refused to finish certain handling tests. They literally stopped testing because they feared for their lives. Internal Ford documents showed the truth. Engineers recommended widening the track by 3 to 4 inches, which would produce major improvements in stability. Management said no. It would delay production and cost money. They had to compete with the Chevy S10 Blazer. Sales mattered more than safety. So Ford did something unbelievable. They removed the dangerous tests from their evaluation program. If a test might roll the vehicle, they just didn't do it. Problem solved. Except the real world doesn't care about your testing protocols. Bronco IIs started rolling over in everyday driving situations. A woman in California swerved to avoid a dog and rolled 7 times. A family in Texas hit a pothole and flipped. The statistics were damning. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety found the rear-wheel drive Bronco II had a death rate of 3.78 fatalities per 10,000 vehicles from rollovers. That was more than triple the rate of the supposedly dangerous Suzuki Samurai. In total, over 800 people died in Bronco II rollovers. Over 260 rollover deaths were documented by safety advocates. The stories were heartbreaking. A high school football star in Florida paralyzed from the neck down after his Bronco II rolled during a routine turn. A mother of 3 in Ohio killed when she swerved to avoid a deer. A young couple in Colorado, both dead after their Bronco II flipped on a mountain road. Each story a preventable tragedy. Consumer Reports gave it their avoid rating in 1989 after it tipped during their handling tests. Insurance companies started refusing to cover them. Geico straight up blacklisted the Bronco II. When insurance companies who love taking your money refuse to insure your vehicle, you know it's bad. Ford's response was predictable. They blamed drivers. Too fast, too aggressive, wrong tire pressure, modifications. Everything except their design. They ran ads showing happy families in Bronco IIs, ignoring the other families planning funerals. When lawsuits piled up, Ford's lawyers argued that SUVs were inherently less stable and buyers should know that. Basically, they claimed it was your fault for expecting your vehicle not to flip over during normal driving. The lawsuits showed more damning evidence. Ford had tested competitor vehicles and found them way more stable. They knew the Bronco II was the worst of the bunch. They sold it anyway. For 6 years, they kept cranking out these death traps, making minor tweaks that did nothing to fix the core problem. Ford finally killed the Bronco II in 1990, replacing it with the Explorer, which ironically would have its own rollover disaster a decade later with the Firestone tire scandal. But that's another story. Today, Ford is trying to bring back the Bronco name with new models. They're hoping you'll forget about the Bronco II, but for the families of those 800 victims, forgetting isn't an option. The Bronco II remains the most dangerous pickup-based vehicle ever sold in America, a monument to what happens when profit beats physics. And that's it, folks. These were the 10 most dangerous, recalled, and controversially deadly pickup trucks ever to hit American roads. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. And here's another video I've picked out for you. See you next time.